It was supposed to be a night of joy. The streets of Fort Worth, Texas were alive with the sound of laughter and fireworks as families gathered to celebrate the 4th of July. But as the vibrant colors lit up the night sky, no one could have anticipated tragedy that would strike in the middle of it all.
Man got a bad bitch in real life, in real motherfucking life. And I ain't never going nowhere. We locked in. You can't compare where you can't compete, stink. Yeah, you know, him, that's
Latasha Tasha Heyman, a beloved makeup artist and the owner of Slay by Shay, had spent years building a loyal clientele with her infectious energy and skill. She was the heart of her community, known for lifting others up, always with a warm smile and an even warmer heart. Tonight, she was living in the moment, capturing the fun on her live stream, sharing the celebration with her followers. Little did she know this night would end in horror. Her fiancé, Tommy Howard, stood by her side, his heart full as he watched the woman he loved celebrate. They had a bond like no other, especially after Tommy had lost his first fiancée to cancer 4 years earlier. Tasha had been his saving grace, helping him heal from a pain he never thought he could recover from. But in a moment's notice, everything was about to change. The night, which began with so much promise, would soon descend into chaos, leaving the community heartbroken and forever changed. Stick around to find out how the night turned into a nightmare, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated as we dive into the heartbreaking events that followed. You won't want to miss this. The celebration on Castleman Street was a sight to behold. The neighborhood was alive with energy as people of all ages gathered to mark the 4th of July. The sound of children laughing as they ran through the streets mixed with the crackling of fireworks that lit up the sky in bursts of red, white, and blue. Families were gathered on porches, chatting and sharing stories, while friends passed around cold drinks, enjoying the warmth of summer night. The air was thick with the smells of grilled food, adding to the festive atmosphere that had taken over the block. Latasha Tasha Heyman was right in the middle of it all, just as she always was. A natural social butterfly, she loved being the center of attention and bringing people together. Her presence was magnetic, a beacon of joy in the middle of the party. Tonight, she was feeling especially alive, her energy infectious as she mingled with the crowd, her laughter ringing out above the chatter of those around her. With her phone in hand, she decided to live stream the celebration, eager to share the fun with her followers. As the camera panned over the scene, she caught the excitement in the faces of the people around her. You could see the joy in her eyes as she captured the moment, her face lighting up as the fireworks exploded above her. For Tasha, this night was everything she loved: community, celebration, and the freedom to be herself. And little did she know, this innocent decision to share her happiness with the world would soon become a chilling reminder of how quickly life can change. As the party kicked off, the mood was light, the laughter genuine, and the night full of promise. But what seemed like an ordinary evening of fireworks and family fun was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted. As the night wore on, the celebratory atmosphere began to shift. The fireworks that had once dazzled the crowd now seemed too close, their explosions shaking nearby windows and setting off car alarms. The initial thrill of the evening started to give way to unease as the fireworks were directed toward houses, narrowly missing rooftops and igniting a sense of discomfort among the residents. The air, once filled with laughter and joy, now hummed with a nervous energy as some of the neighbors shot wary glances at the sky and then at each other. But it wasn't just the fireworks that were causing tension. The street, which had once been a vibrant hub of family and friends, was now witness to reckless behavior. Cars began to rev their engines, and the sound of tires screeching on asphalt filled the air. Drivers performed dangerous stunts, doing donuts in the middle of the street, sending plumes of smoke into the air. The crowd, growing larger by the minute, now watched the spectacle with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, as though the celebration was spiraling out of control. Yet, despite the rising tension and the increasingly chaotic scene, Tasha kept her camera trained on the positive side of things. She focused on the families still enjoying the night, children playing in the distance, and the fireworks that lit up the sky in vibrant displays of color. Her fingers kept swiping the screen, her voice cheerful as she spoke to her followers, oblivious to the growing unrest around her. She didn't want to focus on the negativity. She wanted to show her audience the fun, the energy, and the sense of community that was still present in the air. But the truth was, the night was far from the carefree celebration it had begun as. The reckless stunts, the tension in the air, and the discomfort slowly overtaking the crowd were clear signs that things were starting to break down. Yet Tasha, with her optimistic view, remained oblivious to the danger that was lurking just beneath the surface. The night, once filled with laughter and excitement, shattered in an instant. Without warning, the sound of gunfire pierced the air, sharp and violent. A few loud pops echoed down Castleman Street, followed by a burst of screams as the crowd, once gathered in celebration, scattered in all directions. People dove to the ground, seeking whatever shelter they could find, frantically looking for cover as the chaos unfolded. The vibrant energy of the evening evaporated, replaced by fear and confusion. Tasha, still holding her phone and capturing the scene, was caught in the middle of it all. Her camera shakily panned across the street as she tried to keep filming, even as people ran past her in a frantic blur. The joy she had been sharing with her followers moments earlier was now replaced by panic, her live stream picking up nothing but the deafening noise and the frantic cries of the crowd. Then, in a moment of horror, Tasha herself was struck. The sound of a bullet cutting through the air was followed by a sickening silence as the phone dropped from her hands. The feed to her followers went abruptly black, leaving them staring in disbelief at the screen. The vibrant 4th of July celebration, the fireworks, and Tasha's cheerful voice had all been swallowed up by a violent wave of gunfire, and her live stream was cut short, the fate of the beloved makeup artist unknown to all who had been watching. For those watching, what had begun as a lively celebration had turned into a nightmare, with no warning and no answers. The live stream had been a window into a joyful evening, but in the blink of an eye it had become a chilling reminder of how quickly things could change. As the sound of gunfire faded into the distance, the once bustling street now lay in eerie silence. The joyful atmosphere that had filled Castleman Street just moments before was now replaced by the chilling sounds of sirens and frantic voices. People who had been celebrating just minutes earlier now stumbled through the chaos, some covered in dust, others in shock, searching for loved ones or trying to make sense of the horrific turn of events. Tasha, lying motionless on the pavement, was quickly surrounded by paramedics, but there was nothing they could do. The vibrant woman who had brought so much joy to those around her was gone. Her life, her laughter, and the sparkle she had shared with the world were extinguished in an instant. As the authorities arrived on the scene and worked to secure the area, it was confirmed Tasha was pronounced dead at the scene, leaving her family, friends, and community in a state of absolute disbelief. Her fiancé, Tommy, who had been standing by her side just moments before, was now left grappling with a devastating loss. His world had crumbled around him. He'd already suffered the loss of his first fiancée to cancer, and now, in the blink of an eye, he was faced with the unimaginable, losing Tasha to senseless violence. The pain was raw, and the grief was suffocating. He had been her protector, her savior, and now he stood helpless, staring at the woman he had loved, taken too soon. Around them, the rest of the community was in shock. The familiar faces of Castleman Street, who had come together to celebrate their independence, now stood united in grief. The joyous laughter of children had turned to silence. The festive spirit turned to mourning. The loss of Tasha wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a tragedy that sent ripples through the entire neighborhood. Everyone had known her, loved her, and now they had to face the painful truth that she was gone. The streets, once filled with laughter and fireworks, now held only a quiet sorrow. The community struggled to process the senseless violence that had taken place on what should have been a night of celebration. There were no answers. Only questions. What had gone so terribly wrong? Why had this happened? And most haunting of all, how could they go on after this horrific loss? The mourning had only just begun, and the search for answers was only beginning to unfold. As the police flooded the scene, the confusion was overwhelming. Officers moved through the streets, their footsteps drowned out by the chaos that had just unfolded. The festive atmosphere that had once filled the air was now replaced with flashing lights and the harsh sounds of sirens. The streets, once alive with celebration, were now marked by yellow tape, signaling the gravity of the situation. The officers faced the challenge of piecing together the events of the night. With hundreds of people present when the violence erupted, there were countless potential witnesses, but the crowd's reluctance to speak made the investigation much more difficult. The community was shaken, yes, but the fear of being involved, or worse, becoming the next target, kept most people silent. In the face of such a tragedy, many refused to step forward with information. Back at the police station, investigators turned their attention to Tasha's live stream. It was the only solid lead they had, offering a first-hand view of the events leading up to the shooting. As they reviewed the footage, they were met with a frustrating dead end. The stream had captured the party in full swing, laughter, fireworks, and a carefree atmosphere, but just before the first shot rang out, the feed cut off. The sudden loss of the video was as jarring as the gunfire itself, leaving police with a cryptic ending to what could have been a crucial piece of evidence. Though the live stream didn't provide much insight into the identity of the shooters, authorities focused their attention on the ballistics evidence. Shell casings found at the scene suggested that there were multiple shooters, at least two if not more. The pattern of gunfire appeared to have been well coordinated, with the shooters positioned in different spots, firing from different angles. It was no longer just a random outburst of violence. This had the markings of something much more calculated. But the investigation hit a wall as the community continued to stay tight-lipped. With every door that closed, the police found themselves more frustrated. They needed someone to come forward to provide the missing piece of the puzzle. The fear of retaliation ran deep, and as the investigation grew, it became clear that the hunt for justice wouldn't be easy. Without the cooperation of the very people who had witnessed the chaos firsthand, the path to uncovering the truth was growing darker by the day. As the days passed, the investigation into Tasha's tragic death took on a life of its own. Theories about the shooting began to emerge, each one more speculative than the last. Some believed that Tasha had simply been an innocent bystander, caught in the crossfire of a chaotic situation, a random victim of reckless behavior that had spiraled out of control. Others, however, were less convinced, wondering if Tasha had been specifically targeted. Was she just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or was there more to the story? Theories of targeted violence grew stronger as witnesses, though few began to whisper about a possible argument that had broken out before the shooting. It was said that tensions had been rising throughout the night, with the reckless driving and donuts at the intersection of Castleman and Comanche Streets. Some speculated that this confrontation had escalated into something far more dangerous, with gunfire serving as the deadly end to an already volatile situation. As the details started to come together, investigators were left to sift through a sea of conflicting stories, none of them leading to concrete answers. Meanwhile, the streets of Fort Worth remained tight-lipped, and the public's reluctance to cooperate added further obstacles for the already struggling investigation. The lack of witnesses coming forward left the authorities scrambling for any leads. They had the ballistics evidence, which pointed to multiple shooters, but without solid testimony, they were forced to operate in the dark. The fear in the community was palpable, and it seemed to grow with each passing day. People had their suspicions, but the unspoken rules of the streets made it nearly impossible for anyone to talk. The police needed more than just theories. They needed real information, and the clock was ticking. But with the walls of silence growing thicker, the path to justice seemed further away than ever. As the investigation continued to stall, a breakthrough finally emerged from an unexpected source: social media. A cryptic post from a partygoer caught the attention of the authorities. The message, which appeared hours after the shooting, read, "Some people don't deserve to make it out alive." Though it initially seemed like a reckless comment, it now held a much darker meaning. Investigators scrambled to track down the individual responsible for the post, suspecting that it might be linked to the chaos that had unfolded on Castleman Street. The post led police to Todrick Rogers, a 21-year-old man with a checkered past. After a swift investigation, Rogers was arrested and charged with murder, but authorities quickly realized that something didn't add up. Although Rogers had been present that night, the evidence pointed to a larger, more complex conspiracy. He may not have been the only shooter involved. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered disturbing connections to local gangs and the possibility that the violence had been planned. This was not a random act of reckless behavior. It was starting to look like a calculated move, perhaps linked to a rivalry or turf war. The ties to gang activity made the situation even more complicated, and with each new piece of information, the case seemed to grow more mysterious. Who else was involved? And what was the true motive behind the violence that had taken Tasha's life? The arrest of Todrick Rogers was only the beginning, and the investigation was far from over. The authorities had uncovered a tangled web of connections that would require more time, effort, and cooperation to unravel. And as they continued to search for answers, the questions only seemed to multiply. After weeks of relentless searching, the investigation took a major turn when police finally tracked down Javon Matthews. The arrest of Matthews was crucial, but what followed would prove even more vital. During questioning, Matthews dropped a bombshell. He revealed the identity of the mastermind behind the shooting, Darnell Foster. Foster, a known figure in the local community with deep connections to gang activity, had been the orchestrator of the chaotic violence on Castleman Street. Matthews, though deeply involved, was not the mastermind. The confession sent shockwaves through the department as the authorities now realized that the events of that night had been carefully planned, not just a random act of violence. It took several more weeks of intensive investigation before police finally apprehended Darnell Foster. The arrest, however, did not come easily. Foster had gone to great lengths to evade capture, staying in the shadows and using his network to remain hidden, but eventually the law caught up with him. Once in custody, Foster's connection to the tragic night became clearer. He had personal ties to Marcus Martin, Jr., one of the other victims. A tense history between the two men linked back to a drug deal gone wrong months prior, resulting in a missing shipment and $50,000 of stolen money. Marcus had become a target for Foster's revenge, and that fateful night Foster saw his chance. As investigators pieced together the details, it became painfully clear that Tasha had been caught in the crossfire. She was an unintended victim of a carefully orchestrated attack, a murder disguised as a chaotic public disturbance. While the police had initially suspected that Tasha was a random casualty, they now understood that she had been tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time. The shooting was no longer just a senseless act of violence. It was a calculated move in a much larger, darker story. Tasha's death sent shockwaves through her community, leaving a deep void in the lives of everyone who knew her. Family, friends, and clients all struggled to come to terms with the loss of a woman who had touched so many lives with her kindness and infectious spirit. Tasha was more than just a beloved makeup artist. She was a friend, a daughter, a fiancé, and a savior to those who knew her best. Her warm smile, unwavering positivity, and generosity left an imprint on everyone she encountered. Tommy Howard, her devastated fiancé, couldn't hold back his emotions. Publicly, he shared his heartbreak, posting on social media with a heartfelt message asking for justice and closure. "She didn't deserve this," Tommy wrote, accompanied by a photo of the two of them in happier times. It was clear that the loss of Tasha had shattered him as he reflected on the woman who had brought light into his life after he had lost his first fiancée to cancer. He clung to the hope that those responsible for her death would be held accountable, not just for his sake, but for Tasha's legacy. Pastor Felton Jenkins, Tasha's cousin, also spoke out in the days following the tragedy. Known in the community for his advocacy against gun violence, Pastor Jenkins delivered a powerful message to the public. Standing before his congregation, he urged everyone to take a stand against the ongoing cycle of violence that had claimed Tasha's life. His words, filled with emotion, resonated with the grief-stricken community. "We have to stop this," he said. "Enough is enough. We cannot keep living in fear. We must work together to end the violence." Tasha's death was not just a loss for her family. It was a loss for everyone who had been touched by her life. Her legacy would live on, not only in the memories of those who loved her, but also in the efforts to stop the violence that had taken her away too soon. The tragic death of Tasha has finally seen some form of justice. The three suspects, Todrick Rogers, Siobhan Matthews, and Darnell Foster, were convicted for their roles in the shooting that took Tasha's life. However, for her loved ones, the conviction is bittersweet. While it provides some sense of closure, it doesn't bring back the warmth, kindness, and joy that Tasha brought to everyone around her. The pain of her loss lingers, and the community is left to pick up the pieces. This case stands as a powerful reminder of the devastating effects of gun violence. It's a harsh reality that so many communities continue to face, and it calls attention to the importance of speaking out against these tragedies. Tasha's family and friends have come forward, calling for unity and justice, hoping that no other family has to endure the same heartache. As we reflect on Tasha's story, let's remember her not only for the way she lived, but for the lessons her death has taught us. It's essential to continue fighting for a world free from violence, to stand up for what's right, and to ensure that the voices of those who have been lost are heard. If you've been moved by Tasha's story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us keep telling these important stories. Together, we can bring awareness to the fight against violence and continue to honor the memory of those like Tasha who left us too soon.